after a long struggle, it appears Congress is finally at the threshold of moving forward with the new 5-year farm bill. The House Wednesday passed the legislation and moved the bill to the Senate, where members are targeting next week for approval. UNL Extension Public Policy Specialist Brad Lubben joined us Thursday morning to outline the new details of a bill that took years to accomplish.
That's right. We somehow crossed the finish line here. After years of negotiation, after quite a bit of consternation about whether it would get done or not, the House produced a farm bill this week with full expectations that the Senate will follow suit and pass this bill in the following week, and we'll have a new farm bill to implement.
Yeah, we talk on the final week of January, and we expect the Senate to do something in the first week of February. I'm concerned that you and I just won't have anything to talk about when we get together because we've been doing this for so long.
We've been debating about what direction we're going. We've been discussing the sort of the challenges of getting anything through Congress in recent months and years. But yes, it finally happened. And guess what? It's probably more complex than any bill before it. So there's still a lot of work to do. And
speaking of, the commodity title is one of them that you say is very complex. How so?
Right. We knew going into this debate that it was a fight over sort of southern versus Midwestern interests, crop by crop, a fight over price versus revenue, and we fully expected and not surprised in the final bill to see that the safety net is a choice between a price safety net or a revenue safety net. We called them PLC for price loss coverage. We've been talking about ARC, which is agriculture risk coverage, ARC being the revenue plan. Well, it's a little more complicated even in the final bill, because there's ARC at the farm level, which will be offered as a whole farm revenue safety net across all crops, or ARC at the county level, which will be offered as a crop-specific revenue safety net tied to county averages. So producers will have this choice not just between price versus revenue, but actually between a whole farm revenue plan versus a crop-by-crop revenue plan at the county level versus a crop-by-crop price plan.
Direct payments are gone, yes?
Direct payments are gone. That was the one sort of certainty of having a new farm bill. It probably means that government payments in 2014 will look pretty minimal. We don't have direct payments every fall coming ahead. The new safety net will make payments, if any, after the crop year is over, which is the next fall. So 2014 actually could be a pretty lean year for farm program payments.
Disaster assistance is approved in this for both crops and livestock would obviously play a role in what we saw in the Panhandle late last year.
That's right. We've been waiting on disaster assistance after it lapsed first in 2011. It had been reauthorized for 12 and 13 but not funded. Finally, the new Farm Bill brings both authorization and funding, and we back up to 2012. So those drought losses in 12, those death losses in the livestock herd due to blizzard events that happened in 2013. Finally, producers will actually see programs rolling out that could provide, we think, tens of millions of dollars of assistance in Nebraska. One of the sources of support this year that we would expect to come to fruition.
How does the conservation program change, and could that bring more acres out of conservation and into production in Nebraska?
That would be an expectation. The conservation program in total continues to grow. It doesn't grow quite as fast as it might have been projected before it too had to take some budget cuts. But the biggest cut in the conservation bill is the size of the CRP. We shrunk it in the 08 Farm Bill from 39 million to 32 million acres as a cap. This bill will shrink it from 32 to 24. That's a recognition of some of the falling enrollments as acres came back into crop production, but it also means that probably the next 2 or 3 years we'll continue to see more acres. Nebraska's already sort of taken 500,000 acres or so out of the CRP and back into agricultural production or other uses. We might expect another 200,000 to 300,000 in the coming years.
There are several livestock groups who aren't necessarily pleased with the structure of this farm bill. Why are they opposed to things? And you look at GIPSA and COOL in this.
Well, it's interesting. Some of the livestock groups traditionally would say we don't want to be in the farm bill. That's been a sort of a standard answer. But in this case, there was disappointment that there are a couple of provisions that they would have liked to see in the bill that did not show up. One of those was a provision to repeal COOL legislation, mandatory COOL legislation. Some groups favor COOL. Some groups certainly would argue that COOL looks costly as well as in violation of our trade commitments. They were hoping on language that would simply take coal out of the picture entirely. As it is, without language, we proceed forward with USDA's rule that they implemented last year, subject to the WTO determining whether that is or is not compliant. If it's not compliant, we'll be back to the issue of, can we draw up a rule that actually does work, or do we not get away from the labeling question altogether? If it is compliant, well, we move forward, but perhaps with the debate over cost versus benefits continuing on coal.
And the GIPSA part of that would be?
Right. The GIPSA part of this is there was no specific legislation to direct GIPSA in its continued rulemaking. Recall over the last 2 or 3 years that GIPSA had been out across the country with the Department of Justice talking about contracting and market structure issues in agriculture and moving forward with some proposed rules. They still are on a path to do so, but the Farm Bill contains nothing that would forestall that work.